All right, people are saying property investing is dead. They were saying this before the new budget and they're saying it afterwards. Obviously afterwards, it's a difficult scenario, but today we're going to dive in. We're going to look at some real suburbs. We're going to look at a real house. We're going to run the numbers and we're going to try to answer that question, or at least get a bit more insight into that question of whether property investing in Melbourne is dead. Now, why is this even such a question in the first place? The reason is because Melbourne looks absurdly cheap. Now, $750,000 is not a cheap amount of money. That's no small amount of money. But you got to think about what this means. This is a brick house on almost 500 square meters, not a crazy huge block, but a solid brick home in Reservoir. Now, Reservoir, you look here on the map, very close to the Melbourne city, on a big train line, takes about 20 minutes to get into the city, 25 minutes without traffic in the nighttime. There's good jobs in that area, and again, you're in Melbourne, which has fantastic jobs, a fantastic hub, and ultimately is positioned and will become Australia's most popular city in the near future. So on paper, Melbourne looks incredibly cheap. You're not finding this house price anywhere near Sydney. You're not finding this house price and quality anywhere near Brisbane. So on the surface, it looks incredibly cheap and therefore a good opportunity for an investor wanting to enter the investment property market. However, what do the numbers actually tell us about Melbourne? So the first thing is that if you look over the past 12 months, you can see that areas of Melbourne have been increasing rapidly in property values. So where it's blue, prices have gone up. Where it's red, prices have gone down. So the blue chip suburbs, the more expensive houses in a city, have all stagnated, if not gone down. However, some of these growth areas, the west, the north, Frankston, have been absolutely booming. However, over the 3 months, you can see that equation has flipped. You can see that most of Melbourne is red and the inner city blue chip areas are actually really going down in value. But we're more interested in the value property investing, which would be on the periphery. So as we were discussing previously, Reservoir up here in the north, even Reservoir has gone down. So let's take a look at the numbers and the yields to work out, is investing still a viable strategy as entertainment purposes? So you can see here that Sunshine West is a suburb that we're going to look at. Sunshine West out here in the west of Melbourne has house prices have been absolutely booming, up 16%. However, one of the scariest things for a rental investor is yield. So yield has gone down by 9.8% basically. And yield is not just a number, it's not just a metric of whether a property is good or not. It really underpins and determines whether you can maintain and service a mortgage. Because if you buy an investment property with a 4 or 5% yield, that might save you tens of thousands of dollars, $10,000 to $20,000 in money out of your pocket you have to put on the table versus a yield of 3 or 3.5%. So especially for those early investors where those $10,000 to $20,000 a year really do matter, you can't be ignoring yield, and this is a very worrying sign. Moving over to Meadow Heights, up here in the east of Melbourne, northwest of Melbourne, same sort of story. House prices shooting up, however, yield dropping. Again, Pakenham over to the east, house prices up 10%, yield down 7%. So this is really crazy because in many of these places 12 months ago, you could get yields of 4.5%, sometimes 5% pretty easily. Yeah, so a worrying sign on the macro level across some of these suburbs that used to be particularly good for rental yield and therefore property investing. So we're going to take a look at an example here because I think it's always helpful to run the actual numbers on a real example. So here you can see an $820,000 home. Again, you're not getting this in Sydney or Melbourne. In Sunshine West, on almost a 700 meter square block of land. It's not a brick house, but it's a weatherboard house and it has some recent renovation in the inside. 3 bedrooms, and you can see through the photos, this is roughly what it looks like. A solid home near the city. So what would you expect to get for this property in terms of a rental yield? Here are some similar options. So 6 Dalborough Drive, also Sunshine West, 3 bedrooms, same sort of story. Interior looking relatively similar, renovated, classic renovation. And this one is listed for rent at $500 per week. Another example here, 3 bedrooms, $480 per week. I think this one's got much worse interior. And here, I'll do you one better and I'll give you the actual house itself. So $500 per week for this exact same house. It was sold in March and it's been listed immediately. So you can see here that roughly the $500 per week is what a place like this would get you. So what does that actually mean in terms of the rental yield for this property? $500 a week at $820 purchase price, your gross annual rental yield is 3.18%. So that's pretty aligned with what we were seeing here, and definitely lower than what people have been seeing or what the market has been showing, the data has been showing us over the last 12 months. So what does this actually mean in terms of your salary, in terms of how much you can service a loan, and what do the numbers say about what this means before the budget and after the budget? So we'll take a look here in an Excel spreadsheet. So you can see here we have the purchase price of $820,000, putting down 20%, which means your loan is about $650K. Stamp duty, worked out here with any of these bank calculators, about $48,000. Legal fees, various other expenses related to buying the place. Then you also have an income. So we're assuming that this person here is making about $100,000 per year. So you can see here, rent per week, let's put in $500 per week. And you can see again, rental yield, about 3.18%. And here you can see various other outgoings attached to owning this property. Rates, insurance, bank fees, pest control if you have to pay it. So all up, your expenses for this property run about $50,000, and that's including obviously the interest payments at 6%. So your income from this property is $500 a week, which is about $26,000 per year. So if we run the numbers on your annual position, $26,000 coming in, $50,000 going out, in a no negative gearing landscape, which we are currently in now, that will cost you $24,000 out of pocket. However, if you were in a previously negative gearing landscape, that would be $15,000 out of pocket. So what do those two numbers mean? Honestly, it depends on your scenario, but for someone who has a $100,000 income, $15,000 is pretty hard to service every single year. Additionally, $24,000 in the current climate gets near impossible. So here is a great property, what used to have great yields, and we're starting to see that here in Melbourne in some of these flagship rental yield suburbs, the numbers are getting harder and harder to justify. And right there, you can see the effects of the budget. $10,000 difference in the amount of money you have to fork out from your own salary after negative gearing has been removed. So then I guess the question becomes, is eating the loss of $24,000 a year worth it in the long run? And that's always a personal decision. That always depends on how much you believe the property will go up in value. There's only so much you can infer from infographics like this. Yes, it's going down over the last 3 months, but it's Australia. People are always wanting to come here. There's simply more people living here, moving here than there are homes available. So naturally, you would think prices will go up. Prices probably will go up, but it's no guarantee. And if you look at suburbs like, let's look at Fitzroy. Yeah, Fitzroy hashtag. If we look at Fitzroy houses and we look at the last 10 years, pretty flat. Last 5 years, literally flat, if not slightly down. So you then have to start thinking about your investment timeline. If you're going to hold this for 50 years, if you're never going to sell it, then the capital gains tax doesn't matter for you. Pass it on to your children, whatever. But if you are planning on selling it, if you're planning on using it as a stepping stone to another investment property, with the current climate, there's a possibility that in 5 years' time it'll be flat and you'll have been burning through $24,000 a year to try to service those payments. So yeah, is property investing dead? It's the headline that's going around at the moment. No, there's definitely great deals out there. You can certainly find deals better than this house, but the average Joe, pun intended, of going and finding a random property, a decent home or decent land, buying it, renting it out, paying basically nothing and selling it in 8 years' time with low capital gains, that just doesn't really exist anymore. So is the era of property investing dead in Melbourne? No, certainly not. It probably never will be, but it's not a free lunch anymore. You have to do your homework, you have to do your research, and yeah, it's not a free lunch. So maybe that answers the question. Most importantly, hopefully it keeps you entertained. It's not financial advice. Make your own decision. But yeah, just thought it was an interesting thing to take a look at.